Hi everyone, this is Jerry, and welcome back to my storytelling techniques series. This is the second seminar of the series, and the first one took place 2 weeks ago, and we went over some of the history of storytelling. So we talked about cognitive revolution and the four aspects of basic storytelling that the cognitive revolution gave us, which are gossip, imagination, fictive language, and social web. So today we'll be getting into some detailed techniques of storytelling. I'll say ingredients of how you can tell a story, and not just a story, a good story and an interesting story. Well, first, we need to know what others want to hear, what others would like to hear, and what they think is boring, what they think is interesting. So, first of all, I have three pictures here. One is the Avengers, one's the news, and a classroom. All of these are storytelling. The Avengers is fiction, and news and classroom, they are nonfiction. And even though you might not like a classroom, but to be honest, a teacher teaching a class counts as storytelling. So if you are making a list of the most interesting story and the least interesting story, I'm pretty sure out of these three, the Avengers will be number one, and the number two will be news, and number three will be classroom. Why? Because usually among these three, the Avengers would be the most interesting one because it has those good action scenes and the tension and Thanos' snap and those things. And there's no nerd talks. Like there's no a scientist or a scholar talking for 10 minutes and his words are filled with jargons or those big words. There's none of those in Avengers. Maybe there are a few of them. Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, they talk about how to make Ultron in the second Avengers movie, but that actually makes the story interesting. That scientist talk actually makes the story more interesting. Well, here, so we went over something interesting and no nerd talks. Then we need to get on to things with meaning, so stories with meaning. And usually the classroom will have the most meaning because you need to learn things. You need to learn math, history, English in order for you to survive in the society. You need to learn the basically things to prepare you for grown-ups and things for you to prepare for adult life. Well, the last one is things important to life. And usually this is the news because you don't want to be that friend during a talk and say, there's a war going on. Other friends will say, you don't know that? It's all over the news. And you say, I don't watch the news. And the conversation will go south and things will go out well. Yeah, like the news tells you what's going on in this world, what's going on in our society, and it is just not logical for you to not want to know what's going on around you. So these four kind of stories are what the majority of the public wants to hear. So now let's get on to the ingredients of those stories. I call these 7 concepts as the ingredients of a good story. And they are drama, immersion, familiarity, simplicity, relativity, agency, and trust in the storyteller. We'll be going over them one by one in the seminar. Before we start, I just want to say that all of them are interconnected. Like familiarity is related to, relativity. Like they cannot exist without one another. And some of you might find these concepts unfamiliar. Well, of course you know the words, but you might be thinking, how are they related to a story or to storytelling? Well, that's because they're too simple that we use them without thinking. For example, imagine that you're talking to a friend and you say, "Hey man, I went to the Disneyland last week, and you know what? The line was super long." So, if you were in my previous seminar, you will know that that little sentence counts as a storytelling. You are telling the story of you going to Disneyland and waiting in a line for like 2 hours. And in that like very little story, you get to use almost all of these concepts. So first of all, let's use drama. It has drama in there. So even though it is not a physical drama, so it's not like two people beating up each other, but the drama is you wait in line. And you know that it's pretty boring to wait in line for 2 hours. But you also know that while you're waiting, a lot of things are going on in your brain. You might be thinking about the roller coaster you went on another week ago, or the birthday party you had with your friend. A lot of things are going on in your brain section, and in my word, our brains are constantly fighting civil wars. So there will always be drama, even though you think you're doing nothing. So we have one of the ingredients, and let's see about relativity. It will relate to almost everyone because almost everyone has been to Disneyland or something like Disneyland, and we've all experienced the pain of waiting a line for 2 hours just for a ride that is about half a minute or a minute at most. So we are expecting what to happen. Maybe you've heard that if you can expect the ending of a story, then it might not be a good story, but what I'm saying is that's not true. So you have two now. You have drama and relativity. In agency, we'll get into it later. It is a kind of an abstract idea. The next one's immersion. Immersion means how your readers, well, immerse in the story. If a friend is telling you the story, then 90% of a chance you will be listening, and you'll be listening tentatively. Because if you don't, then your friend will be pretty mad at you. Because, well, you're not listening to him talking. And friends are supposed to support each other. The next one is familiarity. This one is similar to relativity. In this case, you are familiar with the idea of Disneyland. And even though you might not have been to Disneyland, you know what Disney, and you know that Mickey Mouse thing. So it is not strange to you. You are not listening to a thing that you have zero idea about what's going on. And simplicity, that is very easy. You use about 20 words tops to describe something that happened for like 2 hours. Next one, the last one is trust in the storyteller. Of course, you trust the storyteller because the storyteller is your friend, and you tend to trust your friend. Okay, so in that very little story of you going to Disneyland and waiting a line for 2 hours, you've used at least 6 of these concepts that you think you might never heard about. So let's get down to them one by one. The first one is drama. It should be the most familiar one among the 7. We've all heard about drama, and in this case, it is what or how the story gets the attention of the readers or believers or listeners. Because drama works as a page turner. So it makes the readers want to know what's going on the next page. And drama does that through the 3 main branches: conflict, tension, and action. So let's use Avengers as an example. The conflict in Avengers is between the Avengers and Thanos. And the tension here is Thanos' snap. Nobody wants him to snap, otherwise half the universe will die. And action is, of course, they fight. So these 3 catch the attention of the movie watchers. So they keep the money coming. So they keep audiences going to the cinema. And they prevent the audiences from leaving before the movie ends. The next one is familiarity. If you have read the book called How to Read the Literature Like a Professor by Thomas Foster, there's one chapter in there saying that all stories are interconnected. There is no original story. And that is definitely true. Let's just take that Disneyland story as an example. When you listen to that story, you will relate yourself to that story because you have been waiting a line sometimes in the past. It doesn't have to be in an amusement park. It could be a Starbucks line or the line in your school cafeteria. You know the pain of waiting in a line. So the idea of waiting is familiar to you. And I'm pretty sure in your English classes, your teachers have told you to write an essay or write something using your own word. So maybe the teacher might say, write something original. But in fact, there's no stories that are original. All stories are based on something. All stories are based on other stories. For example, Harry Potter. The idea of magic is not original to J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling didn't invent magic. Magic has been around in fairy tales and folklores for who knows how long. So J.K. Rowling borrowed the idea of magic and incorporated that idea into the story of Harry Potter. And there you go, a New York Times bestseller or something. And if you really have an original story, if your story is 100% original, the story won't be good. It might be good, but it won't sound interesting. It will just sound strange. For example, if you're completely unfamiliar to a language, let's say French, if you know nothing about French, you haven't heard a French word in your whole life, and then one of your friends comes and tell you, you know what? French is a very beautiful language. Okay, you'll have the idea of French is a beautiful language. But when an actual French comes to you and speaks to you in French, you won't think French is a beautiful language because you don't know French. And that so-called beautiful language will just sound as a bunch of gibberish. And after like 10 seconds, you'll tell that French to stop speaking in French. Because why is that? I'm not saying French is not a beautiful language. I'm saying it is strange because we know nothing about it. We are not familiar with that. We know Harry Potter is a good story because we are familiar with the idea of magic. Because if you're not, if this magic is original to J.K. Rowling, then the readers will be really confused when Harry Potter waves that stupid wand around. Or if the magic is original to J.K. Rowling, that magic wand will just look really stupid. So the idea of using your own word in your essay, it doesn't exist. We are just borrowing ideas and stories from other storytellers. And don't forget, English analytical essays count as well. The next one is simplicity. It should be very easy. Use as the least word as possible to describe your idea. And usually simplicity is used in commercial storytelling. And by that I mean advertisements. You don't want to read a full novel about how Nike is while driving on the highway. And Nike, they are very smart. They shortened a novel-length description of their company into 3 words. Just do it. I'll say one of the most successful advertisements in life. 3 words. Just do it. That's like 8 letters, and right now everyone knows that. So simplicity means you are telling the story straight to the point, and you're not adding useless and meaningless words into it. So Aristotle came up with a set of rules to storytellers, and they are unity of action, unity of place, unity of time. Unity of action means in the story there should be only one plot line. There shouldn't be any subplots. The characters should only be focusing on doing what they're supposed to do. There shouldn't be any subplot of characters doing something that is not related to the main goal. That is true in short stories, but right now, novel writers, they don't do that anymore. They have to add in subplots to at least get to the length of a novel. Next one is unity of place. Aristotle said unity of place means the whole story should happen, well, in one place. Usually, people interpret this rule as their characters should not be jumping around into different settings. And next one is unity of time. Well, according to Aristotle, he said that a story should take place in less than 24 hours, which it could work for a short story or flash fiction, but nowadays novels, the timeline stretches out to days and sometimes even years. Well, in the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code is a pretty thick book, but it takes place in like 2 or 3 days. Oh, and Dan Brown's The Lost Symbol, even though that's like 500 pages, but it takes place in one night. So that's less than 24 hours, around maybe 12 hours. And simplicity prevents your readers, your believers, or your listeners from drifting away from the story, so that they will be focusing on listening to a story and not thinking about something else. The next one is immersion. Immersion basically means letting the readers or listeners or believers fall in love with your story. And okay, let's think of an example. Let's use Tony Stark as an example. When he died in Avengers Endgame, Marvel fans are sad. Why? Because they have been immersed in the story of the Avengers for so long that they feel what the characters are feeling. Tony Stark might not be sad when he dies, but other characters are sad. And when you immerse into the story, well, you feel what the characters feel. If the characters feel happy, you'll be happy. If the characters feel sad, you'll be sad. And if you do not enjoy the Avengers story, and when Tony Stark dies, you won't really feel anything. You'll just say, oh, okay, a fictional character dies. So, this will happen if you don't like Marvel movies or Marvel stories. One of the most significant storytelling that uses immersion is religious storytelling. And this is why there are thousands of Christians and thousands of Muslims, thousands of Buddhists, thousands of communists out there. Not communists. Well, actually, yes, communists count. Because it is not religious. Okay, let me change the word. It's not religious storytelling. It is belief storytelling. The reason why there are a lot of Christians and a lot of Christians wearing a necklace with a cross on it is they believe and they are immersed into the story that Jesus died for our sins. For example, people who went on a crusade were the people who were completely immersed or completely into the story of, well, I'll say the Bible. But if a person is not immersed into the story of Jesus Christ, then he won't be wearing a necklace with a cross on it, or he won't believe in Jesus Christ because he is not immersed into the story. Same thing goes with Muslims and Buddhists. And actually, same thing goes to the Marxists and communists and capitalists. They are the same thing. It's just they believe in different things. Capitalists, they believe in money. So we could say that their god is money. They should be categorized as the same thing, but nowadays people don't do that. I don't know why. Well, right now in our society, we are at least immersed in one of the beliefs. For example, if you're a Christian, that means you're immersed into the story of Christianity. Pretty simple here. The next one is relatability. This one is, well, related to familiarity. So that should be our second one we talked about. And relatability lets the readers or listeners or believers too immersed into your stories, because they won't really enjoy the stories when the stories are not relatable. And every good storyteller wants their readers, their listeners, the believers to have that story reader identification when they're reading the stories. This is abstract, so let's use an example. Here we have two things, the Titanic and daily news, or evening news here. I'm pretty sure the situation is you only have time to watch one of them. And I'm pretty sure you'll pick Titanic and not news. Why? Because you are related to Titanic. You could be related to Titanic in thousands of ways. Let's think of some. Your family member telling you that Titanic is a good movie counts. Or you could say you have been to a big ship like the Titanic before. So that's why you're related to Titanic. And that counts as well. And you could say, I live in a world with icebergs floating around. And that counts as well. You're also related to Titanic. Or you could say, I'm in a romantic relationship just like Jack and Rose. That counts as well. Or you could say, I am one of the producers of the movie Titanic. Well, that is also a really relatability. Or you could say, I am the cousin of the director James Cameron. Well, that works. You are related to Titanic in one way or another. But you are not really related to news. Because you don't know what's going to happen when you open up the news. Because you don't know, you cannot see into the future. So you're not really related to the stories that news are showing you. Because nobody knows what's going to happen. Let's use another example. I'm pretty sure you know a lot of cities in this world. For example, you know where is New York. You know what's Los Angeles. And you know London. You know Paris. You know Moscow. You know Istanbul. You know Tokyo. You know Beijing. You know Hong Kong. And you know St. Petersburg. Those names, those city names it should ring a bell or something. Like, for example, if a man asks you, do you know what is Berlin? Okay, so you might know it's Berlin. So you say it is the capital of Germany. Good. But if the man asks, do you know the city well? Well, it depends on your personal situation, but in my case, I'll say I don't know Berlin very well because I've never been there before, and there is none of my family members live in Berlin, and I'm not really looking forward to going to Berlin because I'm not planning to, and I'm not interested in their artworks or something. So we know the name Berlin, but we are not related. It is just a name to us. It doesn't mean anything else. So that's why the stories that the storytellers are telling you should relate some way or another to your life or to your experience. Otherwise, you would have already thrown the story away. The next one is agency. That's the one we left out in the beginning. Agency means the storytellers don't directly tell you the story. They either hint or infer, or they either hint, infer, or that's basically the two most famous agencies they use. The more straightforward definition is storytellers want you to figure out the meanings in a story. For example, in the book Lord of the Flies by William Golding, there are a lot of symbolism in the story. But William Golding would not tell you what one thing symbolizes in the novel. Well, side note, if you hear the name William Golding, or if you hear the book Lord of the Flies from your English class, then you should be expecting an essay at the end about symbolism. If you read Lord of the Flies, one of the most famous symbolisms should be the conch that Ralph and Piggy use. And the teachers should say that the conch symbolizes leadership. But you won't be expecting a line from the novel saying the conch symbolizes leadership. So Ralph blew the conch and the boys rushed toward him. Won't have a line in a novel like that. Storytellers never tell you the direct. They never tell you the real meaning hidden under their stories. They always infer. They always throw you a bone and they wish for you to figure it out. Well, you might be asking, why are they doing that? Why don't they just give you the direct meaning? Because according to research, if you know the direct meaning of a story, it will lose your attention. You will think the story is very boring. So when you are actually getting down into the story and trying to figure out things on your own, the story will actually be more enjoyable than stories that actually tell you the meaning. And let's use another example. So here we have the St. George's Cross. And here we have 7 letters, ENGLAND, or some of us may call that England. But the reason why the English put the St. George's Cross on their flag and not the 7 letters ENGLAND on their flag is because St. George's Cross uses agency in the storytelling. Or, okay, let me to clarify. St. George's Cross, nowadays it tells the story of the culture of England or the humanity of England. But the 7 letters here, ENGLAND, we don't even know why those 3 random letters are arranged in that random way and why that arrangement just randomly makes sense. We don't know that. But this picture, even though it doesn't tell us anything, it is just a big red cross with 4 white squares. This thing doesn't tell us anything directly, but it infers too many things. It infers the royal family. It infers the military of England. It infers the people of England. It infers everything in England. Well, there you go. That's agency. It is when storytellers, they talk around their story and expect the readers to figure out what the stories are actually talking about. The next one, the last one, is trust in the storyteller. It should be pretty easy. Like, for example, right now we have 2 books. Number 1 is the Institute, written by Stephen King. Next one is Harry Potter, written by J.K. Rowling. If you only have the time to read one of the books, it would be a pretty hard choice, because you know that both Stephen King and J.K. Rowling are famous storytellers. So you know that both of their books would be really good. You'll be having a hard time picking which book to read. But if you're picking a book between The Institute by Stephen King and another book that some guy you don't know to Stephen King, I'm pretty sure you're not his cousin or son or something. So you don't know Stephen King personally. So you know about him from Google or from your friend or from your family members or from your teacher. And they tell you Stephen King is the good storyteller. So that's why you go and buy his books. But nobody tells you that this random guy on Amazon is a good storyteller. So you'll just assume that that guy is not a good storyteller. Well, at the same time, you're also assuming that Stephen King is a good storyteller because others tell you that. Like before you've read one of Stephen King's books, you'll just be assuming that your friends are right about Stephen King. Well, that's it for our seminar. Hopefully you enjoy it, and there will be future seminars coming up. But I hope you've all picked up a thing or two, and if you do some more practice and exercise, I think you're on your way to become a good storyteller.